Hi, I'm back. And this week I wanted to share with you the indirect painting style. This style was very strange to me, but I will definitely use it again. It was actually really, really pretty, but it just kind of messes with your brain a little bit. And as you watch, I'll explain why. So first off, I did not video the entire process because we only had 4 days to do the painting, and I had to complete this black and white painting the first day to be able to do the indirect painting style. And so what you want with an indirect painting is the opposite of what we have been doing the entire semester. You actually want it as smooth as possible. So we even sandpapered our canvas to prepare it for painting, and then this black and white painting had to be absolutely as smooth as possible before we start adding the paint. And so what an indirect painting style is that you have this black and white toned painting like I have here, and there is actually special paint that you use that is very, very see-through and transparent, and it's made for that. And I actually forget what chemical we used, but he gave us a special chemical that made the paint dry faster. I'm sure there's a million different chemicals that can do that, but we did use, because we only had 3 days to finish the painting, and the painting is consistent of layers. We had to just try to get it done as fast as possible. Every layer was as thin as humanly possible to make it, because the idea of a indirect technique painting is that you create each color by layering colors. So I think I only used maybe 3 colors, or like 3 actual mixed colors, and then the rest I created by different layering techniques. And that is why I chose to do this particular picture, because this is my photography, so I'm not using anyone else's just randomly off the internet. But the reason I chose this picture is because I think it'll be really good for this indirect technique, because instead of trying to actually make the water look transparent, you can literally make the water transparent. And so here I am not overlapping anything, because this is all the first layer. I am just doing slightly different colors, maybe mixing in a little bit more white or a little bit more of the drying agent just to make it a little even more transparent. And so it was really hard, because like with most paintings, you save all the detail work for the end, but here, as you saw, the entire painting had to basically be painted except for the color, and then you just slowly add the color on top. And that was very hard, because I found that even though the paint was very transparent, I still lost a lot of color, or a lot of detail. And so I had to find a way to bring the detail back while still hiding brush strokes, because that was what I found to be the most complicated thing about this technique, was that since everything was so smooth and so slick, the paint had very little to grab onto. So in general, it was basically sliding off of the canvas. So I had to get it on there thick enough that it would actually grab onto the canvas, and then I also had to try to hide my brush strokes as much as possible, because it was very easy to see my brush strokes. And here is the second day, where I come back and begin the second layer. it has to be 100% dry between layers, otherwise it will start picking up paint. And so here I am just trying to get the image of the water coming over the sand as much as possible, and to do that I am beginning mostly with just a complete layer of white, because there's just a lot of white in the picture and my first layer was all color. So now I'm trying to bring it back a little bit and just trying to make it as realistic as possible, especially the water, because the photograph I took, it's actually really funny because I love this picture so much just because it looks like very foggy water, but I just found it was a random puddle on campus. I'm actually pretty sure that someone spilled milk into a puddle and it just created a very foggy effect, and so that's what I'm trying to replicate in the painting using indirect techniques. And as you can see, by now we have lost almost all of the detail. It was very frustrating because I'm gonna have to try to find a way to bring back as much detail as possible, because you can see the detail, it's still there, but it's just has become very, very foggy, which, especially the ripples on the water, we want that to be the top layer. So in the last layer I try to bring back as much of the detail, especially on the water, as possible. And while this technique I don't think is the best for creating perfect copies of pictures, like as you see this painting continue, it's very easy to tell that it definitely is not a perfect copy. Like the colors especially are definitely different. I love the colors, I have no regrets about the colors, but they are definitely not the same as in the picture, because especially since we did not have a wide variety of paints that were transparent, it was very hard to find the right colors, because I wanted to mix as little as possible, because from what I found, at least, the more you mixed, the less transparent the paint actually got. And so I tried to mix as little as possible and just rely on the indirect technique to do the rest. And it was definitely one of my most challenging paintings just because of time restrictions. This is the last painting we made in that class, so I actually literally only had 4 days to complete the painting. And with indirect technique, since each layer had to be completely dry, that meant that I could only do about a layer a day. I think by the end of it, not including the original underpainting, I was only able to do 3 layers. So it really tied me down, because I feel like if I had more time, I could play around a lot with trying to get the right colors. Like in the picture, the water actually has a really pretty purple color, so it would have been fun to like even use like a little bit, like a layer of red and then layers of blue to try to create like a really pretty indirect purple. But I wasn't able to do that, obviously, because of time restrictions, so it was a good learning experience, but it was also the idea that we just had to get it done as soon as possible, so it was not very much of an experimental painting, because I would have loved to play around with this technique a lot more than I had time to, because that's what I've done with just about every painting in this class, is that I just play around and have fun trying to figure out what I can do, and then I decide what I'm gonna do. Whereas with this technique and this painting, it was basically, how can I replicate this painting and make it look good as fast as possible? which I really do not like that feeling. Like, I am a procrastinator, so having a time constraint, I do like having to push myself with a time constraint, but this time constraint combined with this technique was absolutely terrible. Because even here where I'm trying to put in details, the layer is just too wet to do anything with. And so I eventually had to give up on this layer and just decide that I was gonna do everything else. I actually had to come in early before class because the last layer I painted was on the day that we were critiquing and turning in our paintings. So I just had to leave it overnight and pray that it dried, and it did dry just enough where if I was really gentle with the paints, I could do it. So here is actually the morning of when this painting is due. And so I had to come in, I think I came in maybe 2 hours before it was due because it was the first class of the morning, so I didn't have any other classes to worry about before this one. I just had to get it done. And so it was definitely fun. I do love the final product, but this painting was rather stressful. My teacher actually, this is his favorite painting of mine. I think it's mostly just because I was one of maybe 2 students to actually attempt the indirect technique, because the drying agent my teacher bought actually didn't end up working like it was supposed to, which is one reason I am not gonna bother trying to tell you what it is, because I would definitely recommend not using it. So it worked, but it was supposed to be dry in 8 hours or less, and you definitely had to wait maybe 20 hours. Like, you could only paint once a day. And it was very frustrating, so most people gave up and started just using the opaque paints and just painting a regular painting, whereas I just decided to be rather stubborn and try my best to do the indirect technique, because I love trying to find out as many techniques as possible. So I am definitely glad that I stuck with it, because the end result is really, really beautiful. It's one of those paintings where from far away it kind of looks like a regular painting, but the closer you move in, the more you can tell that there is a lot of different layers and colors involved, and I absolutely love it. Like, for water especially, if I ever do more, I don't know, puddle or maybe lake-based paintings, I would highly consider using this technique, because it just made an absolutely beautiful effect, especially with the reflections in the ripples of the water. I was very excited when I started putting those on, because it didn't take anything away from the color, which I often find white does, but since it was transparent white, it reacted exactly like water would, where you could still see everything past the reflection, but the reflection was still there, but it was still transparent, and it created such a beautiful water effect, and I loved it. And well, once again, I do kind of wish that the colors had turned out more like in the original picture, because they were really lovely colors. I think I worked very well with what I had, and I'm very proud of it. And so, yeah, I hope you liked it. I hope you even attempt indirect technique sometime, because it is at least a very good learning experience, because it does teach you a lot about how color works, because while you know what color you want, sometimes it's really hard to mix that color. Like, there is such a thing as greenish purple. Like, in nature, you can find something like greenish purple, but that's something that you can't mix. That's something that you can do with indirect technique, however, because you would simply literally do a layer of green and a layer of purple. And while it would create a different overall look, like maybe mostly purple, if you got close enough, your eye would actually be able to distinguish the two separate colors, which is how it works in nature. And so, yeah, I highly encourage you to try this, and I hope you enjoyed watching this painting. I'll see you next time. Bye!